Michigan Supreme Court Justice Kyra Harris Bolden, and I'm running to retain my seat on the Michigan Supreme Court.
When it comes to making strides, Black women are always at the helm. Michigan Chronicle had an opportunity to sit down with the first Black woman and the youngest Michigan Supreme Court judge, Ms. Kyra Bolden. You know, Kyra, one, thank you for joining us. You're absolutely gorgeous, and everything that you stand for is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Ebony.
Absolutely. So when we talk about this re-election, let's get into it. What are you looking forward to, and kind of what have been your challenges, your battles, your wins, and things so far?
Yeah, so serving almost a year and a half on the court now, and having run in 2022, we have the playbook. We know exactly what we need to do. It's just making sure that people know that I'm on the ballot, the November 5th ballot. And making sure that they vote in the nonpartisan section of the ballot, make sure they complete that ballot, and bubble in Bolden on their ballots in November.
Absolutely. And like with your run so far, what have you realized have been your why? What was your why when you first began, and now that you're seeking re-election, what is that why? What's your mission?
So in 2022, I was pregnant with my first child, my daughter, and she was my main inspiration because there had never been a Black woman on the Michigan Supreme Court before, and I really didn't want my child to grow up in a Michigan where there had not been representation for her on the highest court, and so I ran for her and all of the children of Michigan that could see, so that they could see themselves in that spot. And even though I didn't know if I was going to be successful, I think it was important to try, right? It's important to see that representation of someone trying so that people know what's possible. And my why is the same, being at the table, making those very important decisions that have generational impacts, making sure that I'm just making great decisions for the future generations of Michigan, my daughter, all the children of Michigan, and quite frankly, her children and children's children as well, because when we make decisions, it sets a precedent for how people have to govern their lives for the next several generations.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, you mentioned your beautiful daughter, yes. By the way. I love her. When it comes to little Black girls out there who wants to continue to achieve for higher and get into these positions when it comes to social change, when it comes to being at the helm of this change, what does that mean for you personally?
Well, I dedicate about 30% of the events I do, community events, to youth, and so people 20 and under. And I was recently in Flint, and we were doing a live court hearing at a high school, and a Black girl came up to me and said, "I didn't think I'd see anyone that looked like me." And I ended up inviting her to the court and showing her around so that she would know what's possible. Her name is Faith. And then just recently I spoke to some young people's youth at a Detroit boxing gym, and one young lady emailed me. She's on her way to Grand Valley State University, and she just told me how impactful it was that she spoke to me. She knows what's possible, and not to just listen to everybody else, but really follow the voice within. And so I know that what we're doing is impactful, and I hope to keep doing that to make sure that, again, future generations know what's possible.
Imagine that here in 2024, a young girl saying that I didn't imagine someone who would look like me.
Well, until 2023, they didn't.
Okay, exactly. Cheers to that. I love that. Also want to get into your background. I understand 85 years ago, your great-grandfather, yes. Mr. Jesse, he was lynched because he asked for a receipt. Let's dive into that. And I know you mentioned how I believe you were like 20 or you were in college when you found out this information. So if you can give me that story. and how that makes you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the great fortune of having my great grandmother with me until about the end of college, my senior year, and a few different things happened, and I knew I didn't want to go into psychology anymore. But my great grandmother, who was getting up in age, would just tell me stories, and she told me this story about my great grandfather, which I had never heard before. And my great grandfather, Jesse Lee Bond, was lynched in Tennessee in 1939 after asking a store owner for a receipt, and he was beaten and castrated and thrown into the local river, and the coroner deemed it an accidental drowning. And there's a documentary that my family started called Accidental Drowning. You can Google it. It's called Accidental Drowning. But the kind of most important part of the story was because of the coroner's designation, his murderers walked free, right? And this story of my family's is a typical story of that time, right? Of the South. And so we can't take for granted that at one point that government sanction and justice was the norm in our country. And we also can't take for granted that we can slip back into that if we're not vigilant every step of the way. And so that, and talking to my friends, families, and neighbors, and really wrapping their arms around me, I decided to go into the legal field because I realized that I had to be the change that I wished to see in the world, and I wanted to see justice for generations to come.
You know, as devastating as that story is, how empowering is that to know that his great-granddaughter now is at the helm of justice, you know, when it comes to making those changes. Tell me about that. Like, how does it feel to be that legacy and leave that on?
Well, I have just always tried to make my family proud. And when the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, stated her intentions to endorse me at the press conference, I said, we've gone from lynching to law school and from injustice to capital J justice. We said we were drinking again.
Yes, I love it.
And this matcha lavender lemonade is excellent.
I love it.
Yeah.
Matcha lemonade?
Yes.
Love it. So also, when we think about Detroit, because right now we're here in Roses, Black owned by Charity Bean. When we think of Detroit and the booming small businesses and like now the tech scene and things like that, how special is Detroit for you, especially now in this re-election?
You know, Detroit is so special to me. In 2022, when I was a young Black pregnant woman, you know, I received so much support from my community, and things like that keep you going. Yeah. You know, it was not an easy journey. It's not an easy journey to become the first anything, and certainly not to do it when you're in your most vulnerable state as being pregnant. But, you know, I found strength in my community, and so I'm just so thankful that I was embraced and supported on this journey. And I feel so supported during this retention season to keep me on the Michigan Supreme Court as well.
And I know you are a member of D9 Alpha Kappa Alpha. Tell me how important is sisterhood for you, and also you know, for the masses when it comes to sisterhood, especially when it comes to us. Yes.
Sisterhood has not only carried me, you know, since becoming a justice, but I became a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha in college. And so it has definitely directed me in life, has definitely uplifted me. And I know I always have that safeguard and security when I need guidance and support. I know that my sorority and all of my D9 brothers and sisters are right there with me. And I appreciate that show of support, that genuine support and upliftment that I receive from my sorority and members of the Divine Nine.
Absolutely. And speaking of support, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Voting. Talk about it, the importance of it, the meaning of it, and also I know you were talking about how the non-bipartisan section is kind of like towards the bottom. We want to make sure that they get those votes out. So let us know what we need to know.
Yeah, you know, being a former legislator, I saw how important the elected role is, right? It affects the resources that you have in your community. Your representation literally affects your way of life. And I know a lot of people are focused on the president and federal races, which are all important positions, but your state reps, your Michigan people are right here, really control the resources and how you govern the rights that you have, that governs your life. And so I saw that firsthand. Getting millions of dollars back to my community, but seeing billions of dollars allocated across the state of Michigan. And so on the Michigan Supreme Court, people may tend to think, why is that important? Well, any case that's litigated, and it's not just criminal issues, it's not just constitutional issues, any case that can affect Michiganders. You're talking about election issues, civil rights issues. We do child custody issues. We do zoning issues. We do licensure issues, tax issues, any issues that affect Michiganders. And we're the last word in all of that. So if you don't like, a judge's decision, you appeal to the Court of Appeals, and then you could appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court, but we don't take every case. But the cases that we do take, we're the last word on. And so we're in an incredibly important position. Third branch of government. We are a check and balance on the executive branch and the legislative branch. So we're on the same level as the governor and the legislature, right, as far as making decisions. So I'll start with that. Voting is very, very important.
Yes, it is.
And voting for Michigan Supreme Court may be one of the most critical decisions made this year. But a lot of people miss it because it's on the nonpartisan section of the ballot. A lot of people vote straight ticket, which is completely fine, but it doesn't capture your judges or your justices. So I'm just asking people to please vote in the nonpartisan section first, find it on your ballot, bubble in Bolden, and then you can do whatever you want with the rest of your ballot. But don't miss that nonpartisan section because it's critical.
Absolutely. And when you say it's critical, why is it? Why is it so important for us to vote for Michigan Supreme Court judges in these things? I mean, I feel as if the people needs to hear it from, you, Kyra.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will just cite a couple of cases that were really, really important. So you may remember in 2020 when the Board of Canvassers deadlocked on whether to certify the election. That's an issue that went to the Michigan Supreme Court for decision making. When it was in terms of whether the LGBTQIA community would be included in Elliott Larson's Civil Rights Act, that was a decision made by the Michigan Supreme Court. So many critical issues, whether or not Proposal 3, the reproductive rights constitutional amendment, would even be on the ballot, was a decision made by the Michigan Supreme Court. So you're not even just talking about decisions that, will impact the future lives of generations. It may impact who's on the ballot. It may impact what you are able to even vote on, regardless of, what's on the ballot. So those are just a few things that the Michigan Supreme Court has decided over the years, but certainly in sitting in this position, we see such important issues, whether or not someone has had a wrongful, trial, or whether someone deserves a new trial, if something was messed up in the process. So many different things. It's so important.
Now, last but not least, when it comes to not if, but when you are reelected, what are your hopes to come with this term now?
So my hope is to continue the great work that we've done as of now. We're still at work and we're trying to get opinions out, but I think as of now, we have about 5 majority opinions that I've authored come out that you can view at MichiganSupremeCourt.com if you're interested. Those range on a variety of issues, and I'm very, very proud of the work that we're doing. Other than that, I sit on 2 task forces by the Michigan Supreme Court, the Treatment Court Task Force and the Child Welfare Task Force. So I make sure that the treatment courts have everything that they need because they're an alternative to incarceration. And so we do everything we can to support those programs, right? But in the future, I also just want more young people to know what's possible. I want them to know how important their vote is, that they matter, that they're critical to defining their own future for generations to come, and just to hopefully inspire young people to take these positions of power and really, create a future that is representative of what they want to see.
Absolutely. You heard it here. You heard it here first. Your voice matters. Get out and vote. Thank you so much to the Honorable Miss Kyra Harris Bolden for joining us today. I'm Ebony JJ Curry. Get out and vote.